Welcome to the global series phase 2 of Empower Her Voices video podcast. And in this premiere episode, we are honored to feature Paul Falcon, a best-selling author, global keynote speaker, executive coach, and former CHRO of Nickelodeon Animation Studios. And with a phenomenal career spanning leadership roles at Paramount Pictures, entertainment, healthcare, and financial services, he is a powerhouse in workplace leadership and talent management. And as a trusted voice in HR strategy, a regular SHRM coordinator contributor, and a HarperCollins leadership author, Paul brings invaluable insights into power dynamics, ethical leadership, and career growth. This episode is set to challenge traditional leadership models and equip women with the strategies needed to navigate system barriers, harness influence, and future proof their careers in an evolving workplace. Thank you so much, Paul. We are so honored to have you. And today is the first episode of our phase 2 of Global Series, and your support matters a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful, Faiza. It's an honor to be here. I'm very happy to support you with the work you're doing.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. So, Paul, starting from your journey, your journey from like the leadership at Nickelodeon, Paramount, and other organizations that I've just shared, you have been into different roles, including the corporate HR roles. So, when it comes to the philosophy of the leadership, what were your defining moments which actually, shaped your career? Or when we are starting our career, there's always this point. And how can women or the girls out there who are just starting their career or somewhere they are pursuing their leadership roles, how can they learn lessons from, for their particular growth and advancement in that career?
That's a great question, Faiza. I was doing corporate human resources for probably 3 decades. And to your point, I liked working for the bigger companies with the big names. That was important to me. And
Right.
it's funny because I was responsible for talent acquisition and recruitment. I was responsible for developing teams, the idea of talent management. I had written books on hiring and performance management, leadership development, and ethics.
Yeah, great.
And the whole idea of women in leadership was always so important to me. Now, obviously, I can only gauge it from here in the United States because this is my experience. I live in Los Angeles. But I look at what we're doing, and in a lot of ways, we're doing things the right way. We have a very high female labor participation rate, among the highest in the world. So that's good. When you look at bachelor's degrees, law school degrees, medical school degrees across the board, more female graduates than male graduates today. So that change in the United States is positive, but there's still so many areas that we need to develop. For example, I always say we have problems with the eights, that 80% of CEOs are men, that corporate boards are made up of more than 80% male, that women tend to make 80 cents, it's technically 83 cents on the dollar. And that's for white women. Diverse women make less than that. So we've certainly got our challenges, but at least it's measured. We can see where those challenges lie. And a lot of organizations have built programs to try and raise that up because it's critical to our own, the diversity thought, the idea of having different thoughts, different ideas, and making sure that your senior managers and your C-level and your board reflect the customers that you sell to just makes common sense. And in a lot of organizations for the past 10, 20 years, they've been pushing towards that. And it's showing results, but it's not going as fast as many of us would like to see.
That's very well said. So, as you've mentioned that in the leadership positions, there is a vast majority of male, and even if we talk about our country, even Pakistan and Southeast Asia, same criteria is there, even with more intensity. So, if you talk about sectors apart from education, because education is the only sector where there's female dominancy, which is good. But when it comes to other professions, what I believe, rather than having this concept of being dominant, we should have equality or the skills as per the skills, not as per the genders. So have you are you like in favor of this concept, or do you have other perspectives and narratives when it comes to this thing? Because you are being a part of corporate HR strategies, which is very crucial.
Yeah, you're right, Faiza. I'm very pro the idea of women in leadership, and I'll tell you why. Just from a very basic standpoint, the saying that we use is that demographics is destiny. That you see where things are going, and not only do we have, like I say, more people that are graduating with degrees from the law schools and the medical schools that are female. Almost
Yes.
50% of new businesses in the United States are opened and owned by female owners. This is good.
Wow.
These trends are very,
Great.
very good. But
Hmm.
the thing that's interesting is, if I like to study it as a writer, I will study the demographics of what's happening. And in the industrialized nations,
Mhm.
talent
Right.
scarcity, the lack of people, qualified people, will be a problem for the whole century,
Hmm.
not just now.
True.
We saw it a little
Hmm.
bit during COVID. I think during
Right.
COVID, the CEOs realized for the first time their most important asset goes home at night and may not come back the next day.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, there
True.
was this newfound appreciation for people. But when you look across
Hmm.
the globe, China's one child policy went on for 4 decades. It was way too long.
Yeah.
Um, Japan has 125 million residents right now. By 2040, I think that number is going to be 85 million. The average age is going to be over 65. Who's going to do the work? South Korea has the lowest birth rate on the planet. When you look at these
True.
industrialized nations, where are they going to get the people? And
Hmm.
where I laugh sometimes at the lack of clarity or the lack of wisdom is in the United States right now. You probably heard we have a new administration, and there's all issues with keeping foreign workers out. The truth of the
Hmm.
matter is, by 2040, industrialized countries will be welcoming foreign workers in with enticements, quick paths to citizenship and everything else, because we need the people. But no one seems to talk
Hmm.
about these longer term trends. They just talk about in the
True.
immediacy of things, and that's where I laugh sometimes. But it's not very funny. It's just silly.
Hmm.
I think without that lack of wisdom from the top of the country, it's hard for the rest of us
Hmm.
to figure out what's going on.
True, true. And before going towards any such thing, I totally agree with you. Long-term strategic planning is the bit to go if you have to actually sustain in future. That's very true. So, Paul, a woman-centric approach leadership has historically been shaped through masculine power structures. So, how can women redefine leadership by leveraging emotional intelligence, strategic influence, and adaptive thinking to create a more inclusive and effective leadership model?
Well, Faisal, I'll take up one thing you said when you talk about this idea of emotional intelligence. The
Yeah.
whole idea of, when I was growing up for the past 30, 35 years, we call them soft skills in the United States. And when I brought up the term soft skills, I was laughed at.
Yeah.
And they'd say, you know what, Paul Falcone, go away. We don't need soft skills. Go away. Uh-huh. Then COVID hit.
Okay.
And then they realized that the talent was the thing that these people needed to keep their companies open. And a new term, all of a sudden, a term that had been around since the 1990s, but all of a sudden, the idea of emotional intelligence and the
Hmm.
emotional quotient, the EQ of the leadership
Hmm.
team, is now one of the top 5 things that CEOs are
Yeah,
looking for
true.
in survey after survey after survey.
Hmm.
So the funny thing is, when you think about women in leadership, the empathetic level for women leaders is it's true. It tends to be much higher than for males. And that's something that we
Hmm.
can capitalize on. That's a strategic strength that exists. There are differences in the sexes. It doesn't mean every human being who is a
True.
male or a female has that. But overall, people think of female leadership is
Yeah.
not, um, I hate to say it, but you almost think of it like men tend to be more cut and dry. It's more black and white. Women tend to have a subtler understanding. They can look at the gray better. They can understand that not
Hmm.
everything is black and white. And it's that nurturing approach, it's that collaborative approach that's needed today, not the
Hmm.
killer instinct, that killer instinct that they'll oftentimes associate, whoa, the way males think, it's a killer instinct. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that's not needed, but what I'm saying is what's probably needed more is the nurturing and collaborative approach that women leaders bring. And one of the best examples I can give, Faiza, is that when we study the generational cohorts, the baby boom, which was after World War II, Gen Y, which is now 45 and under as far as their age, the Gen Z Zoomers, the 25 and under crowd, the Zoomers are testing out as the loneliest, most isolated, and most depressed generational cohort on the planet, even more so than the people who are living in retirement homes. And they're the first truly digital generation. But with that digital orientation, a lot of the people skills, the relationship skills aren't there. And that's why they're testing. That's why mental health and mental wellness is so important in the workplace in the United States these days, because we realize it's the younger generation that's missing that. And COVID certainly didn't help, because they missed their high school graduations and their college graduations. And when I think of earlier in my career, my friendships were at work, my mentors were at work. But so many of the younger generation are still working out of the bedroom that they grew up in because they're home. So these trends aren't necessarily helping there, but there are definitely things that I think women leaders can do. And we're all leaders. I don't just mean people who are managers. I think there are actionable tips that women can take to really strengthen their presence. And the only other thing I'd add there, Faiza, is this. As an executive coach, my job is to do two things. Number one, increase someone's level of self-awareness. And number two, increase someone's level of self-confidence. And it's the self-confidence piece is the thing that I think when it comes to women in leadership, if I can help with anything as that male figure, so to speak, it's kind of to give people back to themselves and help them build that level of self-confidence.
That's great. It's really relatable as well and really insightful as well, because all the women out there, if what Paul has just said, the actionable tips or the strategies and regarding the emotional intelligence, something that even if you're a manager, a coordinator, you can opt these, you're a teacher, you're a school head. If you're going to go with these things by keeping in view the overall industrial dynamics, it is definitely going to help you. So, Paul, as women move into leadership, as we're talking about leadership, they often face like more dilemmas and ethical complexities as compared to the male figures. So, how can they balance assertiveness with integrity, navigate their power struggle, or make high stake decisions while maintaining credibility as well? Because to maintain the credibility is also something really important rather than making decisions in a haphazard situation.
No, I agree, Faiza. I totally agree. The one thing I would say, just to end what we were saying a minute ago, is the studies will basically show that confidence almost has a bigger impact on a person's career than competence. In other words, it's not a matter of how good they are, it's how self-confident they feel about themselves. But the same studies are going to show that women on average tend to have about half as much confidence as men, interestingly enough. But my point and what I've written about is this idea that confidence is like a muscle. It's something that you can build over time. But the idea is you have to make it comfortable for you. So what you want to do is pursue a strategy of confidence with modesty. In other words, it doesn't mean you have to turn into a loud male or whatever. It's just when you're looking at the big picture, how do you make it work for you so that you're comfortable with it? And one of the things I would say, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
No, please, carry on.
Oh, no, I thought you said something. Yeah. One of the ways to do it very easily is to give it away. In other words, if you can help other women or other men too, but in general, if you can help people feel more self-confident, build people's self-confidence, that is like life is a boomerang, right? It comes back to you. What emanates from you returns to you. And I think that if you can give that gift away, it's like the universe knows that you can't give away anything that you don't already have. So by giving it away, the universe is telling you you already have it to give. And I think that builds self-confidence more than anything. And again, just look at it very simply in the sense of what is my superpower, or what can I give away to make other people feel better about what they're doing? And when I do management training sessions, I'll usually tell the managers, if you walk away with nothing else from my 90-minute training or half-day training, whatever it is, write this on the back of an envelope. You want to have a really strong team, build their self-confidence. Because when people feel confident about what they're doing, they act a different way. Those CEO surveys that
Hmm.
say they want emotional intelligence are also saying that they want
Hmm.
creativity and innovation. That's also one of the top
Oh.
5. And if they're looking
Hmm.
for creativity and innovation, you're only going to get that. Honestly, Faiza, you're only going to get that from people who feel confident in themselves, confident taking a risk, feeling that there's a trusting relationship. If you have people who are afraid of you, you can forget about innovation and creativity. No one is going to take a risk of volunteering new ideas
Hmm.
if they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. So
Hmm.
again, as you move into leadership yourself, just think very, very simply. Keep life simple. How do I get the most out of my
Hmm.
employees? Is build their level of self-confidence. And then as a subset of that, how do I help the women on my team become stronger in terms of their self-confidence? And again, my simple
Hmm.
answer to that is give it away. It's a gift that you could pay forward to other people.
Yeah, great. I really like it the way you have said it, that confidence and competence. So you have to build the confidence actually to utilize the competence. And that is something really good. And generally in organizations, yes, I agree with you that when it comes to emotional intelligence, the entire persona, how you're going to carry yourself, how you're going to communicate matters a lot. Even though if you're competent and you're unable to share your perspective or communicate what you wanted to, then you'll not be able to actually strive, specifically in this competitive era. So, Paul, many organizations unconsciously replicate leadership in their own image, like reinforcing barriers for women. So, what cognitive biases and systematic obstacles hinder women's access to leadership roles, and how can they strategically challenge and disrupt these barriers to claim their space at the decision-making tribe? One thing that you have already mentioned, like you have just shared it, but taking it further, how do you see this thing?
Yeah, it's funny. I totally agree with you. It's almost like we call it implicit bias or unconscious bias. There are
Okay.
assumptions that we make that we're born with. It's almost like this. I hate to say destructive, but it kind of is. It's destructive cultural
Hmm.
conditioning, right? It's like decades
Hmm.
of reinforcement and cultural messaging. And the easiest example I can give you in American English, we talk about the idea of the prince versus the princess. And the idea of if you
Okay.
say to someone, boy, he's a real prince, that basically means he's
Hmm.
honorable, he's ethical, he's a good person, he has a good heart. If you say, wow, she's really a princess, what you're
Hmm.
basically saying is she's entitled, she's spoiled, and she's asking for things that she hasn't earned. And that's the easiest
Hmm.
example I can give because we read fairy tales from when we're, children. And it's the prince and the princess. And the one thing you notice about the princess in all the fairy tales is she's always waiting. She's waiting for the prince
Yeah.
to save her. And I think we
True.
have to sit back sometimes. It's funny, Faiza, we got to sit back and think about this stuff. I don't want to say
Hmm.
overanalyze it, but I think we have to be conscious of the fact that there is an implicit
Hmm.
understanding sometimes that we make of these things.
Yeah.
And the question becomes is how do you change your what I would call your foundational belief, your sponsoring thought about who you
Hmm.
are and who you choose to be. And it's not that hard.
Hmm.
Again, we just have to raise our awareness level. And remember, executive coaching is about raising self awareness and raising self confidence. So, one of
Right.
the things I always say is think about it. It's almost like it's all about we. It's always about we. Create this collaborative win win mentality. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
me and I. It can be we and us. What can we do to help? How can we make it better? What can we do to increase
Hmm.
revenue, to decrease expense, to save time, to increase customer satisfaction? If
True.
you start thinking about it and that becomes part of your vocabulary, that becomes part of your parlance, so to speak, people aren't really intimidated by that. They're not going to look at it and say, why is he or why is she always trying to get ahead and make themselves look good? What they're doing is they
Yeah.
constantly keep saying is, how do we do this together? How can we help make this better? People will see that as a collaborative approach and people will not be as threatened if your approach tends to be more
Hmm.
collaborative sounding in nature.
Mm. So collaborative approach is something which is always useful when it comes to these kind of scenarios or the leadership transformation. because you have mentioned it twice that we should opt for the collaborative approach. Like in education sector, we always used to say that to the teachers and to the students, don't enforce silo culture, enforce collaborative learning environments where they should sit together, brainstorm, get something out from their peers, and then they'll come the best. This is something that we also practice, and it is like very, I'm sure it will be helpful for the women out there in different careers. So, Paul, talking about this AI bit and the AI transformation going on around us. So, with AI automation and the gig economy reshaping traditional careers, what essential skills or leadership bits that they needs to have if it comes to the adaptive strategy? So, because innovation is something when it comes to the transformation or maybe anything, because before AI there was this Google bit, and before that Microsoft. So the evolution is always there after every 20, 25 years. So how to, make ourselves transition through this thing?
Faiza, I respect your question, but I'm going to push back on it a little bit because everything,
Right.
all I hear now about is AI this and AI that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand. It's the big new movement. Everyone's worried about AI.
Mm.
I understand that. But what I'm going to say is this.
Yeah.
Leadership is an emotional connection to somebody. If I were to say to
Mm.
you, Faiza, tell me about the best boss you've ever had, the most inspirational manager you've ever had. Because at my class, I
Mm.
teach at UCLA. I do this with the classes all the time. And they raise their hands as students and they say, she was someone who inspired me. She was someone who made me feel very self-confident. Next student,
Mm.
he was someone who challenged me to do things I didn't even think I was ready for. He seemed to have more faith in me
Mm.
than I had in myself. We go through
Yeah.
these examples and everyone talks about who that greatest manager is that they ever had. And the question I ask them
Mm.
is this: are you describing that person's beingness or their doingness? In other words, their beingness is who they are.
Mm.
Their doingness is what
Right.
they did. Now, I know the answer is both,
Mm.
but which one is the primary driver? And it's funny, Faiza.
Mm.
What comes out in the classes is almost always the same. The first students raise their hand and they say, the doingness. Okay, tell me about
Doing
that.
this.
Well, you have to
Right.
do the things, and when people do things
Mm.
and they're consistent and right. But as we keep talking about it, someone in the back of the room says, wait a second,
Mhm.
I think it's their beingness. I think it's who they are that drives what they do, not vice versa. And that to me is the ultimate answer. The funny thing is, when you think about
Mm.
who's the greatest boss I've ever had, you're talking about two things: their character and their caring.
True.
Character is
True.
about trust and respect and transparency and
Mm.
openness and communication. Caring is everyone wants to know they work for a boss that cares about them personally. As a matter of fact, when you
True.
study Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennials and the Zoomers,
Mm.
and you look at the top
Mm.
5 things that they want in study after study after study, they want career and professional development. They want to do
Yeah.
ethical, they want to do the work for an ethical company doing meaningful work for a management
True.
team that cares about them personally. And it's much
Mm.
easier
True.
than we're making it. If you can just come from, if we can all take a collective breath and exhale and just realize you don't have to
Mm.
do anything. As a society, we're always busy chasing our tails with our hair on fire, trying to do.
True.
The reality is
Yeah.
you just have to be a certain way. And if you're coming from
Mm.
good character and you're coming from good intention of getting to know your people and support your people, you become their favorite boss just because that's how it works. So again, I think that if you think of it in the context of the favorite
Mm.
boss syndrome, as I call it,
Yeah.
it's that emotional connection. It's piercing people's
Mm.
hearts. And especially as
True.
the technology gets bigger and bigger and bigger in our minds, let's go
Mm.
to something simple, which says no one's going to say my favorite boss is someone who is technologically savvy. That doesn't make someone a
True.
favorite boss. Someone's
Mm.
favorite boss is the emotional feeling that you feel towards that person, the thankfulness, the
Mm.
gratitude, the appreciation. That's what, as leaders, as managers, we have to pay forward. But I would say for people who are not in management yet, or they're individual contributors who don't want to go into management, that's okay. We're all leaders. We all impact the people around us.
Mm.
Give it away.
True.
Give away what you have as the gift, and it will come back to you. Karma is real. It really is.
Yeah.
So
True.
that's the best. It's
That's
always
it.
the best. I've got more thoughts I'll share with you in a minute. But I mean, when I really get down to the core of it,
Mm.
if you think of the connection to people, the interpersonal
Mm.
connection, that's through the heart, not through the brain.
Yes, true.
And people will look at you as a role model, and people will repeat the behavior that you show
Hmm.
them. This idea of selfless leadership or servant leadership or whatever you want to call it
Yes, true.
is about putting other people's needs ahead of your own and expecting them to respond in kind. That's the healthiest way to make it through
Hmm.
your career, in my humble opinion.
Great, very well said. Like leadership. So you have shared very different. I would not say like different perspective for this question. Generally, when I ask this question, so there's like, okay, we have to go with AI and with, but yes, I agree with you. It's always now when you were saying this, I was recalling in my mind my favorite mentors and bosses, and it's right. It was about that empathy. It was about that caring. It was about that feeling and the connection and the impact that they had on our heart. So, yes, it's about those things and not the technological tools. Very true. So, I'm sure that the woman out there, you can, what Paul has just said is really an eye opener, because there's a lot of pressure on each one of us. Because, Paul, I'm referring to the people around me, right? So, whenever I talk to them, they're always like, AI is there, we need to do this first, we need to get equipped. So there's a lot of pressure that they're taking on their minds, and at times there are people who are not tech savvy, but their interpersonal skills are really good. So they have this pressure, okay, I have to do it, but I have this hindrance. So for all those people out there, as Paul has just said, that if you are, if you aim or if you wish to become the leader in your certain profession or career, so it's all about the impact and the connection that you are going to make. Rather, obviously, learning about any skill and tool is an additional bit to ease your work for you or to ease your time, but it is not going to impact the inspiration or the motivation for the people around you. So it's something really useful, and I'm sure this, if we, the people who have these thoughts in our mind, if you're going to implement that, it will be helpful. So, Paul, it was a really insightful conversation, and the perspective that you have shared in terms of the leadership are quite different and relatable. Why I'm saying different, because it's new. Obviously, we're learning. We're always learning. Learning is a continuous evolution, and we're definitely going to follow these steps. So before that, we wrap up. So, what is that piece of advice? Though you have already shared number of advices for the women out there. So, if they want to, because I really like the bit which you have said at the last, that leadership is not that every person is a leader. It's about the impact that you're creating around the people, right? The people around you. So, what advice you need, you like want to give to the women out there who are really passionate about their careers? May it be any field. Might be a woman is interested in becoming a writer, or someone wish to go to medical or STEM careers. So, what is that one piece of advice that can actually help them for any uncertain, situations, or for the daily bit? What are they supposed to do, or in terms of inspiration as well?
The one thing I'd say, in fact, I love the way you recapped everything. Totally agree with what you said. I think career
Thank you.
introspection is what I call it. A lot of people don't think about what they're doing with their careers or where they're growing it. They're just like a cork on the
Yes.
wave, and the job comes up and they take it, and another job comes up a few years later and they take it, but they're not directing themselves. The career introspection, they're really giving thought to. I say there's three rings. There's an industry, there's a company, and there is a job, right? So what industry do you want to
Right.
be in? Which companies and why? And what role would you
Hmm.
have? That when you change jobs, it should be for one of those three reasons. The other thing I usually
Hmm.
tell people is build your professional network. Again, a lot of people don't
Hmm.
think about LinkedIn and these other types. You really need to do that, because what I found
True.
was earlier in my career, I was at UCLA Extension in the School of Business and Management as a student.
Okay.
And in the 2-year program to get my HR certificate, I ended up getting 3 jobs from people who I became friends with in that 2-year program. I don't
Hmm.
remember anything about what I learned, but I do remember
Right.
the people who, ended up hiring me because we became friends. And then when I went to teach
Hmm.
in the program, and I taught in that program for 2 decades, I would tell them, everything I'm about to tell you is going to be really interesting, but you're going to forget it. The people sitting next to you in this classroom
Hmm.
probably going to hire you. Someone's going to hire you from this classroom, or you're going to
Hmm.
hire them. So I want you guys to
Hmm.
network. I want you to talk with one another. This is really critical, not me. This is about you.
Hmm.
So the idea of building your professional network is critical. And the other thing I'll tell people is this: elect your own personal board of directors. You don't have to pay them, but find your mentors. Because I did
Hmm.
call mine though. I had about 3 or 4 people that if I was ever going to change a job, I would always call them and I would get their advice. Don't be afraid to ask. There are so many people out there
Hmm.
that don't want to ask. I can do it all myself. That's a mistake. In today's
True.
environment, have people who you trust, theoretically who are older than you, who are higher than you in terms of their experiences and where they stand in the
Yes.
corporate hierarchy and everything, and ask them to help. People will help if
Hmm.
if they're asked to help. And all of a sudden, I don't talk to them all the time, but if I call them up because I have an opportunity, I'd love to pick their brain a little bit. They're always happy to talk to me about
Hmm.
that. So these things, and now
Hmm.
this applies to males as well as females. But my point
True.
is, when you're looking at building leadership muscle, when you're looking at building career muscle, you're thinking about your career trajectory. Where can I go? What do I want to do? Without that
Hmm.
level of career introspection, without that network, without your own board of directors, you can
Hmm.
only go so far. So it's almost a mindset shift in my mind, Faiza. It's like, think about it a little bit differently. The saying I always
Hmm.
use is change your perspective and you'll change your perception. Like, change the way you look at
Wow.
it. And then you're gonna
Hmm.
experience it differently because you're moving
Hmm.
energy in a new direction. And I think that is
True.
important. I think that's really important.
That's very useful advice, and thank you so much, Paul. It's been a very insightful conversation with you, and you have shared different perspectives, and those were like very insightful in terms of an eye opening for us as well. And for the audience, as Paul has said, like there are different things. If I'm just going to recall, so we really need to go for the collaborative culture or collaborative environment or the collaborative setup that we should encourage for our team. We should, for a leader, as Paula said, it's all about inspiring, it's all about connecting with the people and be empathetic. Because once, if you are in the leadership position, you're there to inspire and not to boss around. And then the emotional intelligence bit, as Paula said, that it's not about the competence, it's about the, I guess you've said the competence and the connection.
Correct.
Yes. So Paul has said about that when it comes to you have competence and connection. So it matters that how connected you are to your peers or to your subordinates or to your team members. And then at the last, what Paul has said that networking and reaching out to your mentors is something really important. You can't do it all alone. You need people to mentor you. You can have one mentor or multiple. It depends upon you with whom you are comfortable. But the person should be, as Paul has said, that experienced in their own career, and then they can, guide you about the way forward. So there are lots of things. If you're going to pick one thing that he has said, I'm definitely sure that it is going to help you in your career. And as he has said, that it's about you have to change how you're looking at the things, and then everything will fall in place. So this was the first episode of the global series season 2. And Paul, we're so glad that you took time out and you supported it for this thing. And I was really happy that for the phase 2 of this series, you accepted the invite, because I wanted to, by looking at your profile and the kind of work that you have done for the being a coach as well, for the leadership and for the overall HR, actually, I would say the organizational behavior. It was really important when we talk about leadership that first the theoretical myths should be debunked, and then one can be forward and forward. So you like actually nailed it very well. So thank you, and thank you to the listeners out there. Stay empowered, stay enlightened, and try to create as much impact as you can, people, for the people around you. Because at the end of the day, as Paul has said, what matters is that the person or the people around you are not going to recall you for your designations or for your strategies or tools. They'll recall you for the kind of behavior, for the kind of emotional attachment you have with the people. So see you again with another episode. Till then, take care.
Thank you, Faisal. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.